In the bustling streets of New York City, life carried on at its usual chaotic pace. Street vendors shouted their prices, cab drivers honked impatiently, and pedestrians hurried through the crowded sidewalks. Amidst the frenzy, a young street artist named Ethan worked tirelessly on a chalk mural in Times Square. His fingers were stained with vibrant hues, and his clothes bore testament to his craft. Ethan wasn't famous or wealthy, but his art was his voice, a way to connect with the world around him. Ethan's mural that day was a breathtaking depiction of the city's skyline at sunset, with golden hues cascading into a sea of purples and blues. Passers-by often paused to admire his work, some dropping a few dollars into his donation box, others simply offering words of encouragement. Ethan never expected more. For him, art was a calling, not a career. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, Ethan noticed a familiar figure approaching. It was the man in the hat. This stranger had passed by a few times over the past week, always observing from a distance, but never speaking. Today, he seemed different, purposeful, almost resolute. Ethan glanced up briefly but returned his focus to the mural, assuming the man would move on like the others. "Beautiful work," the man finally said, his voice deep yet kind. Ethan looked up again, surprised by the sincerity in the stranger's tone. "Thank you," he replied, brushing chalk dust from his hands. The man removed his hat, revealing a face that was unmistakably familiar. Ethan blinked, his mind racing to place the identity of his unexpected admirer. It wasn't until the man extended his hand and introduced himself that Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "I'm Denzel Washington," he said with a warm smile. Ethan's jaw dropped. He had seen Denzel's films countless times, drawn to the actor's ability to convey depth and emotion. But meeting him in person was something Ethan had never imagined. I don't know what to say," he stammered, his voice trembling. Denzel chuckled. "You don't have to say anything. Your art speaks volumes." For a moment, they stood in silence, the noise of the city fading into the background. Then, to Ethan's astonishment, Denzel reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, dropping it into the donation box. "Keep doing what you're doing," he said. "The world needs more beauty like this." Ethan was overwhelmed, not just by the generosity, but by the recognition. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea what this means to me." Denzel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I think I do," he replied, before turning to leave. But just as he stepped away, a commotion erupted nearby. A young woman screamed, and a crowd began to gather around a man lying on the pavement. Instinctively, Denzel and Ethan rushed to the scene. The man, middle-aged and visibly distressed, clutched his chest, gasping for air. "He's having a heart attack," someone shouted. Ethan froze, his mind racing. He felt helpless, unsure of what to do. But Denzel sprang into action, his years of playing heroic roles seemingly translating into real life. Kneeling beside the man, Denzel spoke calmly and firmly. "Call 911, he instructed the crowd. "And someone bring me a defibrillator if there's one nearby." To Ethan's surprise, Denzel's voice carried an authority that prompted immediate action. A woman dialed emergency services, while a security guard ran to fetch a defibrillator from a nearby kiosk. Meanwhile, Denzel began performing CPR, his hands moving with precision and care. Ethan watched in awe, his admiration for the actor growing with every passing second. But he also felt a pang of guilt for standing idly by. Determined to help, he knelt beside Denzel and asked, "What can I do?" Denzel glanced at him briefly. "Keep talking to him," he said. "Let him know he's not alone." Ethan nodded, leaning close to the man. "Hey, stay with us," he said, his voice steady, despite the fear coursing through him. "Help is on the way. Just hang in there." Minutes later, the paramedics arrived, taking over the situation. The man was stabilized and rushed to the hospital, his life saved thanks to Denzel's quick thinking and Ethan's encouragement. As the ambulance disappeared into the distance, the crowd erupted into applause. Denzel stood, brushing off his hands. Well, he said with a faint smile, that's not how I expected my evening to go. Ethan laughed, the tension finally breaking. You're incredible, he said. I can't believe you just did that. Denzel shrugged modestly. It's not about being incredible. It's about doing what you can, when you can. The words resonated deeply with Ethan. He realized that while his art might not save lives, it had the power to inspire, to bring people together, and to make the world a little brighter. In that moment, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Before they parted ways, Denzel placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Keep creating, he said. And remember, greatness isn't about fame or fortune. It's about what you give to the world. Ethan nodded, his heart full. Thank you, he said again, knowing the words would never fully capture his gratitude. As Denzel walked away, blending into the crowd once more, Ethan returned to his mural. But this time, his strokes were more deliberate, his colors more vibrant. He was no longer just a street artist. He was a storyteller, a dreamer, and a believer in the power of human connection. And as the city buzzed around him, Ethan smiled, knowing that he had witnessed something extraordinary, not just the kindness of a stranger, but the undeniable impact of compassion in its purest form.